Some individuals experience emotions with intense depth. They navigate existence resembling open windows in a tempest. Each emotional blast surges inward, and they take it all in. Music, a look, an intonation, a quiet. Everything impacts them more profoundly than it ought to. They analyze one word for days, mentally review dialogues, and question why others appear so unbothered as they submerge in unseen tides. To be overly emotional isn't a flaw. It is a form of sensitivity that perceives the world not as it factually is, but as it is felt. Still, it is also draining. Since you exist with emotions that linger, you are simultaneously the creator and the injury. The majority believe sensitive people are delicate, but that is not entirely accurate. They aren't feeble. They are absorbent. They take in excessively, too quickly, and too profoundly. Psychologists term this high emotional reactivity, the nervous system's propensity to react strongly to minor stimuli. Past biology, however, it is also a mental structure, a method of seeing life where feelings are not guests, but residents. Consider it like this. While some minds are like glass, the minds of emotional people are like water. Each ripple counts. Every word makes waves touching the floor. This explains why their recollections pain them longer and their happiness persists more deeply. They recall not just the event, but the feeling of it. At times they are jealous of those who disconnect effortlessly, who can leave without a tightening chest or spiraling thoughts. Yet profound emotion isn't a hex. It's merely burdensome in a society that values insensibility. Since presently disconnection seems like power and sensitivity seems like weakness. What if the reality is the reverse? What if those who feel excessively are, in fact, the most connected to actuality? What if feelings are not defects to control but wisdom in a different tongue? Emotional potency frequently starts young. In childhood, these individuals are labeled overly dramatic or too delicate. They weep readily, not from weakness, but from not yet knowing how to build defenses. In time, society instructs them that deep feeling is troublesome. Consequently, they start to conceal it. They begin to smile while shattering, saying sorry for their feelings, faking wellness when their entire being screams the opposite. This is where the psychology becomes compelling. Suppression fails to eliminate emotion. It just inters it while living. Unspoken feelings discover alternative outlets: anxiety, perfectionism, exhaustion, or guilt for the intensity. Research on emotional regulation shows individuals who stifle feelings endure greater bodily stress. Their pulse remains high for longer. Their minds stay vigilant for potential rejection or dispute. To put it differently, their physique becomes their journal. It recalls each feeling they were instructed to mute. Yet a contradiction exists. Deeply emotional individuals frequently grasp others better than they grasp their own selves. They interpret expressions, intonations, and states with startling precision. They observe the small hesitation in a companion's voice, the change in a person's gaze. They perceive unease before it is ever verbalized. This is emotional attunement, a type of empathy close to instinct. It is a coping mechanism developed over years of sensing everything. You know, many believe empathy is simply benevolence. However, for sensitive individuals, empathy is automatic. It is their method of self-preservation. If they can gauge everyone's emotional state, perhaps they can avoid future pain. Yet this exact talent transforms into their load. Since you are built to soak up feelings, you also soak up surrounding suffering. You begin bearing emotions you don't own, like incessant emotional interference. Occasionally, emotional individuals misinterpret emotional potency as love. They believe love must always sting slightly, or that fervor requires turmoil. They desire connection so badly, they mistake emotional upheaval for profundity. In reality, though, sound love is not overpowering. It's constant. The tempest seems recognizable not because it is love, but because it reflects their internal landscape. This explains why numerous emotional individuals get caught in cycles of emotional peaks and valleys. Connections beginning like pyrotechnics and finishing as smoke. They fall quickly, believe readily, and ache profoundly. When it all disintegrates, they don't simply lose an individual. They lose a part of their own being they offered. Experts label this tendency emotional fusion, where one's identity gets intertwined with someone else's feelings. This is why sorrow for a sensitive person is not merely grief. It is confusion. It seems like a loss of self, not just a loss of fondness. It isn't only in romance. It appears in all places, in friendships, within families, and in professions too. Sensitive individuals frequently overcommit, assume everyone's issues, and name it compassion. Beneath the surface, it can be dread of appearing aloof, dread of exclusion, dread of insufficiency. Thus, they continue providing until depleted, and subsequently fault themselves for being exhausted. It's peculiar. They might be the most considerate individuals present, yet they are the ones frequently feeling invisible. Since they dedicate vast time to comprehending others, they neglect needing comprehension. The occurrence of emotional contagion also exists. As feelings transmit like energy among people, science indicates mirror neurons in our brain cause us to copy others' emotional conditions. In sensitive people, these neurons appear more stimulated. This is why they cannot tolerate unease in a space, or why they feel depleted following social engagements. They are emotional absorbers, soaking up not only feelings, but entire environments. How, then, do you exist in a reality that perpetually inundates you? How do you shield your empathy but retain your sensitivity? It begins with limits, emotional limits declaring, "I am able to care for you without merging into you." Many sensitive people believe limits imply separation, but they truly imply equilibrium. It's realizing that compassion does not equal self-negation, that you can grasp a hand without shouldering their tempest. An additional significant fact exists. Emotional potency is also creative potency. Numerous renowned artists, authors, and philosophers were profoundly emotional individuals. Their sensitivity acted as their receiver. It aligned them with the faint frequencies of human existence. They didn't merely watch the world, they experienced its limits and then converted that experience into art. That is the concealed power of sensitive people. They render emotion into significance. As others pursue reason, they pursue reality via sensation. They perceive beauty in suffering, knowledge in sorrow, lucidity in turmoil. Their feelings aren't static. They are communications, and those communications frequently guide to deep understandings of humanity. This, however, is where difficulty arises. Emotional awareness does not inherently equate to emotional balance. You can be profoundly conscious of feelings and yet be dominated by them. Consciousness is the initial stage, but management is the expertise. For sensitive individuals, management can feel like treachery, as though quieting down dismisses their reality. It isn't about ending emotion, however. It's about discovering how to steer it. Consider feelings as ocean waves. They aren't intended to be halted, just ridden. The ability of riding emotions is known as self-regulation. It is developed via mindfulness, via consciousness, via the silent practice of watching instead of responding. It's declaring, "I sense this profoundly, yet I select not to submerge in it." In psychological studies, this equilibrium is called affect regulation, the capacity to sense completely without being overwhelmed. Those who achieve it do not cease being emotional. They merely cease being devoured. They continue to feel it all, but they refuse to let all feelings define them. That is the critical moment. When a sensitive person understands that profundity doesn't equal turmoil, that empathy doesn't necessitate depletion, that love doesn't mandate self-forfeiture, that is when their talent at last becomes strength. Since beneath the weeping, the rumination, the potency, lies a profound wisdom of the heart. It is the sort of wisdom that understands how to stay with suffering rather than fleeing it, that understands how to discover significance in instances many ignore. To get to that stage, however, they must shed the shame of feeling. They must cease apologizing for their sensitivity. Since sensitivity is not an affliction, it is a blueprint. It is the mechanism by which the spirit senses life. Thus, when a person says, "You're too emotional," their actual meaning is, "You feel beyond what I can manage." Perhaps that is acceptable. Perhaps the world requires individuals who weep at dusk and guffaw loudly at minor happiness. Perhaps the individuals who feel excessively are those preventing humanity from growing numb. They are the emotional transformers, changing pain to empathy, sorrow to wisdom, potency to art. And while they frequently feel misinterpreted, their sensitivity is the thing that maintains the world's compassion. Since in a society fixated on productivity, somebody must recall the meaning of being affected. The reality is, sensitive individuals do not just sense their feelings, they inhabit them. Each happiness transforms into a whole season, and each letdown seems like winter arriving prematurely. They don't perceive grief as a fleeting cloud, it becomes the climate. This is why emotional recovery for them isn't about progressing past. It's about discovering how to exist within their tempests without the thunder frightening them. You see, when you sense everything excessively, the world doesn't merely travel through you. It leaves imprints. Language that others dismiss remains stamped in your thoughts. Instances that were minor for others transform into markers for you. You do not just recollect memories, you re-experience them, with the identical pulse, the identical respiration, the identical pain. That is the emotional recollection system operating overtime. The amygdala and hippocampus reenacting feelings with facts. This explains why sensitive people frequently say, "It seems like it occurred yesterday, though years have gone by." Yet behind that potency rests something deep, the potential for profundity. They comprehend suffering not just rationally, but soulfully. If someone weeps before them, they don't merely perceive tears, they perceive the narrative behind those tears. This is why individuals often trust them, including strangers, as sensitive people exude security. Their empathy seems like gravity. It draws suffering toward recovery. Yet this identical talent can pivot inward as self-censure. They bear not just their personal feelings, but also accountability for everyone else's state. Another's quiet becomes their wrongdoing. Another's grief becomes their load. And the most brutal aspect? They frequently believe they are assisting, but they are actually just absorbing, attempting to mend feelings that were not theirs to bear. Here is where emotional development starts. Grasping the distinction between empathy and entanglement. Empathy states, "I feel alongside you." Entanglement states, "I feel for you so intensely I've lost myself." Sensitive individuals must realize that compassion lacking limits is self-desertion. It is honorable, true, but not maintainable. When you perpetually save others from their suffering, you refuse them the development that arises from confronting it. And you refuse yourself the calm that arises from releasing it. You are able to love another profoundly without forfeiting yourself in their turmoil. That isn't disconnection, that is insight. Psychology now informs us that feelings are information, not commands. They provide information on our needs, our values, and our pains. But sensitive people frequently mistake that information for fate. If they sense rejection, they conclude they are valueless. If they sense anxiety, they conclude something awful must be factual. Yet, feelings are not facts. They are indicators. And indicators get misread when processed through past injuries. This explains why sensitive individuals frequently exist in emotional time travel. A current feeling activates a past recollection, and suddenly, they are responding to specters. That exhale from a companion recalls childhood criticism. That unopened message seems like desertion. Their brain links points that are not linked, as their nervous system recalls what their logical mind has misplaced. Clinicians term this emotional reasoning, where feelings transform into proof. Recovery arrives, however, when you discover how to watch your feelings without submitting to them. To state, "I sense this intensely, but that doesn't make it reality." That brief halt, that instant of consciousness, alters all. Since feelings, fundamentally, are just energy moving. They are intended to flow through you, not label you. When you oppose them, they intensify. When you critique them, they retreat. But when you permit them to stream, without dread, without guilt, they fulfill their aim. And then, something lovely occurs. The sensitive individual becomes emotionally astute. They continue to feel everything, but now they understand how to hear their feelings without being controlled by them. They realize grief isn't frailty. It's an indicator for rest. That rage is not malevolent. It's a limit alarm. That shame is not fact. It's an instructor. And as soon as they begin deciphering feelings rather than submerging in them, they become experts in empathy, not casualties of it. Let's be truthful, though. It requires bravery to exist that way. Since the world frequently instructs sensitive people to harden, to develop thicker skin, to cease taking things personally. Sensitive people, however, don't require thicker skin. They require firmer grounding. A distinction exists. Thick skin desensitizes you. Grounding reinforces you. Grounding involves discovering how to remain linked to yourself even as feelings escalate. It involves being the quiet within your personal tempest. Here is something seldom mentioned. Sensitive individuals frequently possess amazing intuition. They detect nuances others miss, an intonation shift, a pause, an energetic pattern. Science supports this. As per studies on emotional intelligence, people with high emotional sensitivity display increased activity in the insula, the brain region in charge of self-awareness and empathy. That isn't sorcery. That is biology adjusted for perception. Their instinct is just consciousness amplified by sensitivity. Yet intuition lacking self-belief can morph into anxiety. When you sense excessively but doubt your feelings, each instinct becomes a dread. Thus, a portion of emotional development is discerning when to believe your gut and when your injuries are talking instead. Many sensitive people wrestle with self-criticism. They review errors perpetually. They utter phrases like, "I ought not to have said that," or "I likely bothered them." Their empathy pivots inward as self-monitoring. Perfectionism, however, is just dread disguised as control. It is the conviction that if they manage everything correctly, none will depart, none will be harmed, and no feeling will seem too burdensome to endure. That isn't existing, though. That's enacting safety. And sensitive individuals merit more than a performance. They merit tranquility. How, then, do they discover it? Tranquility for sensitive people commences when they cease attempting to manage what they feel and begin gaining insight from it. It's when they concede that feelings are not issues to resolve, they are communications to comprehend. You cannot cease being sensitive any more than you can cease deep breathing. You can, however, discover how to breathe through your feelings without smothering in them. Emotional development frequently occurs in silent, common moments, not large epiphanies. It is selecting not to dissect a text. It is resolving not to pursue finality from one who denies it. It's staying with unease without making it a narrative. Minor acts of emotional management gradually construct an unyielding internal balance. And when sensitive people arrive at that state, they become among the most grounded spirits you will ever encounter. Since after you have endured your own feelings, you cease dreading them. You cease fleeing from potency, and in their place, you begin using it as fuel, fervor, ingenuity, empathy. All of it turns into a continuation of your emotional profundity. You grasp feelings were never the adversary. They were consistently the guide. Let us discuss love once more. Since for sensitive individuals, love is their most tender and most resilient place. They love as if it's their mission. They offer everything, at times too early, at times excessively. Yet when they discover loving with equilibrium, not to plug a gap, but to offer their completeness, their connections change. They cease falling for potency. They pursue harmony. They cease inquiring who will remain and start inquiring who provides calm. In that change, they find that proper love doesn't deplete your feelings. It polishes them. It instructs you on feeling securely. It doesn't request you to be less sensitive. It just supports your feelings with concern. And perhaps that is the most genuine form of closeness, when your emotional landscape is witnessed, not criticized. The psychology of individuals who are overly emotional is not about delicacy. It is about frequency. They exist aligned to higher frequencies of existence. They sense the world in high definition. Hues are more vivid, suffering is keener, quiet is more pronounced. And though that sensitivity can render life burdensome, it also renders it vibrant. They dwell where most only tour, at the crossroads of heart and intellect. Emotional sensitivity, however, is not a lifelong condemnation to suffering. It is a crude substance that, when molded by consciousness, turns into insight. The aim isn't to feel diminished, it's to feel correctly. Not all feelings merit an equal response, but all feelings merit acknowledgement. When you handle feelings as indicators, not judgments, you commence guiding yourself rather than being guided. There is something profoundly human in being emotional. It recalls to us that we are living, that we are concerned, that we are linked. The world may commend reason, but it is feeling that provides reason significance. Feeling is the pulse of each choice, each aspiration, each gesture of love. Lacking feeling, intellect has no bearing. Therefore, perhaps being overly emotional is not the issue. Perhaps the issue is a world that has lost the ability to feel. Perhaps sensitive people are not damaged. They are prompts. Prompts that human existence was never intended to be tidy or disconnected. It was intended to be experienced, completely, profoundly, bravely. If you are one of these individuals who feels excessively, loves excessively, thinks too profoundly, weeps too readily, grasp this: you are not feeble. You are living in high definition. Your feelings are not defects to be concealed. They are evidence that your spirit remains whole. Since the instant you cease feeling, you cease truly existing. Thus, feel. Feel profoundly, but prudently. Allow feelings to travel through you like waves, not barriers. Allow them to instruct you, but not ensnare you. And when anyone says you are too emotional, smile, since what they are genuinely stating is that you remain conscious in a world that is partially slumbering. The world does not require less sensitive people. It requires more hearts prepared to remain open when all instructs them to shut. It requires more empathy, more kindness, more individuals who can perceive the suffering behind the facade and the beauty behind the turmoil. It requires individuals like you, since emotion, when comprehended, not stifled, turns into light. It turns into the sort of light that does not obscure. It exposes. It makes existence authentic, unfiltered, and valuable. And perhaps that is the objective. Not to flee the potency of feeling, but to discover calm inside it. To exist not by desensitizing emotion, but by achieving control. Thus continue feeling, continue caring, continue being affected by dusk, music, and narratives. You are not excessive for this world. This world is frequently just too superficial to contain you. Yet profundity always discovers profundity, and when you encounter others who feel as you do, you will grasp something remarkable. Those who feel excessively are those who make life worth experiencing at all.